I still am looking for something that would demonstrate a direct U.S. engagement in the peace process. What we have seen in recent months, and I quite frankly like it better, are direct contacts between Armenia and Azerbaijan without mediators, whether Washington or Moscow or Minsk Group. I think it's a far healthier process than if it was taking place under the auspices of a mediation. So I think that part is good, but people are doing a lot of connecting of dots. You had this interview in Turkey with the American ambassador. Again, a very long interview, and at the end, he started talking about, leasing the Zangezur corridor under a 100-year lease. But I'm still waiting to see something more visible and more practical, where the United States is actually being involved with Armenia and with Azerbaijan in pushing the peace agreement forward.
Well, you have vast knowledge of both of these countries, and I before I get to the Sunak and Zangezur region, I want to just see, how do you think if the U.S. was in charge of these peace talks, how would it be different than what it's been in the past, where, in other words, the Russians have been leading the peace talks? Would the U.S. maybe have a different strategy?
Well, it certainly would be a different strategy than Russia. Russia has its own objectives, and they're not good, for the South Caucasus. And I think, if the United States, if a Trump administration would be involved, there would be very much the idea of, let's get a deal done fast. And let's make sure that, this is truly a peace agreement for which President Trump can take some credit in achieving that. But I think in terms of the outcome, which would be signing the peace agreement, which, by both Yerevan and Baku's own words, is close to being possible. That would be the major U.S. objective. Now, what happens the day after? And someone else had been using this vocabulary. I'm not smart enough to think it, but it's really a good way of thinking. Okay, great. United States, others get their wish. They sign a peace agreement. Well, now what? And I think that's where we would have to see what the future would look like under a Trump administration. I think it would be very heavy on U.S. Private sector involvement in some way in the region, in Armenia, in Azerbaijan, maybe even Georgia if things change there. I'm not sure how, and I think this is something that particularly in Azerbaijan people need to pay attention to, the influence of evangelical Christians in the White House might lead to pressure for return of the people who left Karabakh at the end of the last fighting. I think, I'm not sure how that will play out, but there's a lot of I think there's a lot of talk among Armenian Americans about putting pressure on both the Congress as well as the administration. So how I have no idea, how Trump would view that. I do not see the interest being in energy. This is not the 1990s. And you have an administration whose policy is U.S. energy dominance. And so the activity that, a Trump administration would pressed forward on is increasing U.S. oil and gas exports globally. And so, not be a whole lot of interest in, supporting further development of energy in the Caspian region and Azerbaijan in particular. If companies would come in there, fine, but it's not the sort of thing that would be an area that would be promoted. What I would see is, high tech, maybe interest in promoting that. Perhaps some interest in developing the middle corridor, though I think that's still again, it remains to be seen how different the Trump approach would be on that from what the Biden administration was. But I would watch more for that than energy.
And energy would have been the initiative in the past.
Yes, yeah,